Hi, Jono Hersey from the French Wine Centre here. Welcome to our first episode of Taste Then Drink, presented by the French Wine Centre. The whole idea behind Taste Then Drink is that we taste through some of the wines that we import and we drink them, we consume them. So tonight we're going to be looking at Champagne Guibera, Blanc de Blanc from Cremont, Champagne Jean Vesselle from Bouzy, the epicentre of Pinot Noir and Champagne, and Champagne Caze Thibaut, 100% Pinot Meunier, made in a very vinous and natural style from Chatillon sur Marne. Now, we're going to do some champagne food pairings, but not your traditional oysters and the like. We're going to have a bit more of a winter theme. So before this starts burning, just going to chuck some, actually we'll go butter, and we're going to cook up some bone marrow. Now we've got 3 pairings, and we are going to compare them against all 3 of the champagnes and figure out what goes best with what. So, let's get the butter in. Might as well. Beautiful. Now, I'm just doing this quickly so we can talk about the champagne. That smells beautiful already, obviously. I've got more, but for the sake of this, 2 bits sliced long ways. You can do it in the oven. However, the oven is down by the house. We're currently in the stables. So we're going to just put it down like that. We're going to let that cook through. But until then, let's open up some champagne. So, what's a champagne tasting without talking about the different ways of opening up champagne? The first is what they'll say in a restaurant. It's when you quietly do it. The sigh of a lady is what they say. So just like this. Wait till it's a little bit loose. Probably a bit more of a sigh, a bit more than just a sigh. So I'll just quickly check this. It's beautiful. Now, the second way to open a champagne bottle is to actually embrace what champagne is all about. And that is the pop. It doesn't matter that we lost a little bit because there's 1 of me and 3 of these. Beautiful. And the third way to open a bottle is to sabre it. Now, we won't spend too much time on it, but what I will say is a bottle has 2 sides when it's produced. They put it together. One seam is thicker than the other, and that's the theme you want. Seam, not theme. Peel back the foil. Now, the most important thing is if you put it in ice, the only way this will backfire, now I've said that it's going to backfire, is if you have it in an ice bucket up to there and the neck is warmer than the body. Now, I've learned about that the hard way, but along the thick seam, sometimes it's important to know when to walk away. So we'll save that for another time. And that'll suffice. We're going to do a quick first impression of the wines. So, the order in which you should drink these, if you are going to drink them together, is the Champagne Guibera first, followed by the Jean Vesselle, followed by the Champagne Caze Thibaut. The reason being, Champagne Guibera, Blanc de Blanc, 100% Chardonnay. It's the leanest, most precise, purest. So flavours will swamp it. It's got a basis of pear and Granny Smith and lime and citrus. The next is the Jean Vesselle. It's 100% Pinot Noir, so it's a Blanc de Noir. Now, the reason you have this next is it's still fairly sort of traditional compared to the Caze Thibaut, and we'll get to that in a second. But Pinot Noir is a slightly fuller body champagne. Particularly this sees a little bit of skin contact. Oeil de Perdrix is Oeil de Partridge. So that's that colour, just off a rosé. I think you could probably classify it as a rosé, but it's in its own little sort of niche sort of category, Oeil de Partridge, which is a great way to explain it. It's a really beautiful colour. But you've got a little bit more body on the palate, still really quite clean and crisp. Now, the third, Champagne Caze Thibaut, is 100% Pinot Meunier. So you're going to see some red fruits, just like the 100% Pinot Noir from Jean Vesselle. But Pinot Meunier is a little bit more rustic. But then the way Fabien Caze produces this wine is very vinous. And when I say vinous, what I mean is it's made in a way that it reflects a wine from maybe a little bit further south in France, that of Burgundy. So he really holds on to it until it's quite ripe, not overtly ripe, it's not flabby or anything like that. But what he's trying to do is he's trying to reach optimal ripeness so he doesn't have to add anything. No sugar or anything like that. So often, if you add a little bit of sugar in, you'll need to combat it with high acid. Because he's not doing that, he's also barrel fermenting it. So he actually wants it to have quite a bit of body and breadth to be able to hold it its own next to the wood. Now, the Guibera is a classic, quintessential Blanc de Blanc. Razor sharp acidity, mineral, very pure. Got put onto these guys by Rudolf Peters from Pierre Peters, recommending these guys as a really up-and-coming producer. Now, a really good way to explain it, if anyone's familiar with Pierre Peters, which is a very, very good producer from Limonel-Serge, so in the Côte de Blanc, where these guys are from, quite often described as a sword wrapped in silk. Now, if you're going to use the same sort of analogy for these guys, it's more like a sword in an electric socket. There's no lush coating of autolysis flavours, which is the yeast and brioche and that sort of thing. It's just all about the energy and the minerality. Alive. You could have that, you could have half a bottle or a bottle of that and you'd be more awake after than you were before. Now, if you'd like to, and if you've got the means, Rydell do black glasses where you can taste without knowing the actual colour. And the best way to learn about tasting between the grape varieties and champagne is to do just that. Because when you look at 100% Pinot Noir or Pinot Meunier wines without seeing the colour, that's when you can really notice the red fruits. So the main difference between the first wine, the Blanc de Blanc, and this is this incredible array of raspberry, cherry, you know, very sort of simple fruits. I could get into a little bit more sort of complex sort of aromas, but let's just keep it simple. So on the nose, it's quite a bit, not necessarily richer, but maybe the fruit flavours are a little bit more obvious. Less lemon lime, like the Blanc de Blanc. A little bit more red berries. On the palate, the first thing you'll notice is it coats the mouth more so than the first one, the Champagne Guibera. The Guibera is like a sword, or like I said, a sword in an electric socket. It just goes through and just livens everything up. Whereas the Jean Vesselle coats the mouth quite broad, very pleasing. Maybe a touch less acidity, maybe a touch less minerality. But really pleasing, really moorish. Where this you want to drink more because of its life and energy. This you want to drink more because it's so pleasing and welcoming and open. Now, you'll notice the 3 different colours, they're really quite unique. So the great thing is about looking at 3 different varieties is that if they were all made exactly the same way, it would have been really interesting and we could sort of see some minute differences. But it's really important to know that, yes, they're their own cepage or grape variety, but they have the hand of the winemaker there. And they definitely all tell a different story. If they were made in the exact same way from 3 different producers, then myself as an importer wouldn't be doing my job correctly. Now, it's important that I explain the term vinous again. Vinous is, imagine smelling a wine, a little Bourgogne Blanc from Domaine Alain Charvet and Puligny Montrachet, and you smell it, and it fills the glass, and there's layers, and it's riper. Now, this wine is made with minimal to no sulphur. So, Fabien Caze in Chatillon-sur-Marne, slightly lesser known region, particularly from these guys. You know, Côte de Blanc, Cremant, was the first AOC in Champagne regarded for white wine on incredibly intense chalk soils. A small amount of subsoil and then straight onto the body of chalk. Bouzy, where Vesselle is from, is this beautiful natural amphitheatre, which used to be really famous for still red wines because it used to get so much warmth to Champagne, not in the scheme of things. Chatillon-sur-Marne, lesser region on really quite fertile soils. Pinot Meunier, I'll touch on this point because it is important, lacks the finesse of the other 2. It's a much more rustic grape variety. And the way that Fabien handles this, by low yields, organic viticulture, really quite ripe, bringing it into the winery, settling it out overnight, and then putting it to barrel so it can build complexity in layers. It really makes you think about Champagne again, and it is utterly delicious. There are 2 kinds of Champagne drinkers in my mind. There's the people that love clean, precise, maybe a little bit of brioche or a little bit of sort of chalky minerality. And then there's the Shallots camp. So Shallots is one of the most celebrated winemakers in Champagne, and his wines are very sort of oxidative and very natural in style. Now, a lot of people absolutely detest his wines. I mean, look at, I'm going to use a famous Australian critic at the moment, Tyson Stelzer. He really loves clean and pure Champagne producers, and he always marks Shallots down, which a huge amount of people will disagree with. However, he just likes clean wines. And when I say clean wines, they're not dirty, they're just a little bit oxidative. They've got a little bit more sort of body, maybe not from the actual soil itself, but in the way he handles it. And this is definitely in that camp. Not necessarily oxidative, but, well, yes, slightly oxidative, but very much in check. Fabien's, one of his biggest inspirations is Shallots. So when talking to him, he's very much about letting the terroir, but also the evolution of the winemaking do its thing. So a lot of people that like really clean and pure and precise wines will say, well, that's not the terroir because it's getting disrupted. The message is getting disrupted throughout the journey. Whereas people in the Shallots camp say that the terroir is more than just the soil, it's the process of how it evolves. Now, in terms of stylistic, these guys are ultra clean. Don't think so much the brioche and sort of autolysis flavours, a little hint, but not too much. It's definitely about the pure fruit and the incredible minerality that comes from the chalk. The Vesselle is all about this beautiful fruit sweetness, a little bit of the minerality that you get in Bouzy, but nowhere near as much as what you get in the Côte de Blanc in Cremant. But it's definitely sort of that sort of more traditional style, but then seeing a little bit of skin contact isn't traditional. So that's a little bit of a twist. Now, when you can't necessarily see it here, however, if you've got a bottle of this at home, when it's been laying down, get it out and put it up to the sky, and you'll actually see dead yeast leaves still in the bottle. It's actually quite incredible. There's a beautiful haze. I love all three of these wines. I truly do. And they are looking particularly good tonight. Now what we're going to do is we're going to hook the gas back up, spark it up, and do some food and wine pairings. Winter edition. We're back on deck. We've got gas. While I waited for the gas, I caught up with some really good friends, Ludovico Anardi and Neil Young. I also got acquainted with these three champagnes. And now, the bone marrow is almost done. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through the steps to create bone marrow toast, a classic French dish that pairs beautifully with champagne. And then we're going to see which one it works with best. So, plain white bread. I'd usually just go the simplest bread you can get, which would just be, you know, something that you would get from the supermarket. Take 2 bits of bread. Remove the bone marrow. It's quite well cooked by now. I'm just going to pour out the oil. Put it back in with the crust on. And just watch that, because we don't want to overcook that. We just want to slightly crispen up the sides. So now, I haven't done this dish with 3 different cepage lined up, so I'm actually genuinely interested to see what it suits the best. Now, so that's done. See how it's just a little, that's probably a little bit too much. Obviously this bread might have a little bit of sugar in it, so it's burnt quite easily. So what you do is you put it on top of each other using the knife. Chop off the crust into perfect squares. And that's exactly what you want. You really do want a little bit of that sort of sweetness. It actually does look a little bit brioche-y. So that might be why this dish does go so beautifully with champagne. The bone marrow does by itself. You can just roast little sort of stubs of bone marrow, and it's absolutely beautiful. So, they look like little pillows. Now, I'm just thinking the best way to do this would be, oh, yum. I wish you could see this. So I'm just going to fold it over. So it looks a little bit burnt on the outside, but I'm really keen on making, because it's so soft on the underside where the bone is, and because it is full of moisture, you can really slightly sort of burn the edge. A little bit of blood. Scrape that off. Yeah, that is special. I'm making a mess of it. It's more difficult than it looks. Smear that across. We're just going to get the other one. How hot are they? I can hold that. Oh, so smear it across like butter. That smells beautiful. Put those there. Now, a little bit of fresh parsley. Now I'm just going to chop it up into even smaller cubes just so we can taste back and forth. Put that a little bit on there. All right, now, so when finding out if something matches something, I do take a little bit of the food first. So. That is seriously good. So the effect that the Champagne Guibra, the Blanc de Blanc, the 100% Chardonnay has on it, is you get this beautiful sort of sweet sort of white bread from the bread, obviously. Then you get the marrow, really sort of fatty sort of marrow that's got a bit of saltiness. And then the champagne comes through and just absolutely cleans it up. You're left with nothing there, you know. You're just left with the pleasantries, I should say. Now, so, let's have another little bit. Now, funnily enough, the Jean Vesselle, the 100% Pinot Noir, actually loses a little bit of its fruit sweetness, becomes a little bit stringent on the palate. So far with this food and wine match, the Champagne Guibra is winning. Funnily enough, that actually, the 100% Pinot Meunier from Caze Thibaut really sort of, it almost makes the Marrow taste like truffle. Like it has this other element of flavour. It improves the food and it makes the wine more complex, really quite flavoursome. But, however, for this combination, the bone marrow on simple white bread with a little bit of parsley, Champagne Guibra takes the cake. And to prove it, I am going to have another one on top of another one. That is fine food. That is utterly delicious. Righto. On to the next. All right, dish number 2 is going to be a little bit of black pudding. I'll get the blood pudding on first, un momento. So, how we do this, blood pudding, there, so, you want little flat discs. Probably go a scallop of each and a little end bit for good measure. Wait 1 second, I'll just put a little bit of olive oil. Using Kerner wine olive oil, good friend of mine, Damo. We've done every vintage since 2011 together, and he dabbled in a little bit of olive oil the other year, and it's very good. Righto, here we go. So, just grab the discs. Oop. That's all right, that'll burn off. Not that it needs much more time. You don't need to cook it through or, vigorously. Still sort of a bit of a light touch is nice. But the scallops, we're literally just going to sear a little bit and present on top. I'll put that there. Here. Ready to go. I'll do three. So, this might be a bit of a funny sort of combination to a lot of people, but it's very similar to something like, I don't know if anyone's had oysters and stout before, but the umami flavours just go so beautifully together. It just proves that a lot of people sort of maybe simplify things too much and just go by the colour and the heaviness. So this afternoon, you know, I had a stout, and most people have it at the end of the evening, whereas I think it actually freshens me up a little bit. Now, this particular blood pudding is falling apart, so we are going to have to improvise with maybe a little bit of bread. Otherwise, it's going to be impossible to pick it up. What we'll do, one bit of bread, similar sort of story, chuck it in there just a little bit. It's amazing how quickly you can smell that sweetness coming through. So that's done already. And that's obviously just because of the sugar in it. Like I said in the previous video, that is just so much sugar in there, it sort of caramelizes really, really quickly. And what we are going to do is we are actually going to improvise a little bit. And instead of, usually what you do is you'd slice up the blood pudding, little discs, put the scallops on top, a little bit of a knife and a fork, put it down in one. However, because this has fallen apart so easily, we're going to sort of smear it across as you would if you were making bacon and eggs with a bit of blood pudding, one of the greatest ways to start the day. So smear that, put these. Oh. Beautiful, that's perfect. I would never usually do this, but because of the sake of the cooking, for food and wine matching, we are going to split them up. So we can have more mouthfuls. I'm just going to slice these up. Okay. So I truly have no idea which champagne is going to pair best with this dish. For those that haven't had blood pudding before, imagine the best bacon and eggs. Imagine the best big bacon and eggs you've ever had. So imagine beautiful, quite sort of flavoursome tomatoes, really flavoursome concentrated mushrooms, beautiful bacon, an egg mixed together with salt and pepper. Now, I don't know if that's just a nostalgia thing because blood pudding reminds me of beautiful, beautiful breakfasts, out at Total Old Game Resolve with the Virgos, or if that's actually what it tastes like. But every single time I have a little bit of blood pudding, it just takes me back to the most beautiful breakfast you've ever had. So, with Champagne Guibarat, the 100% Chardonnay, nothing really sort of changed. There was a little bit of time before my first bite and the sip, but the wine sort of stayed relatively the same. The scallop cleans up the blood pudding, so the acidity and the cleanliness and the freshness within the Guibarat wasn't necessarily needed. Now, funnily enough, so with the bone marrow and the toast, because it was very sort of salty and fatty, Chardonnay and the Guibra came through and cleaned it up. But with the Jean Vesselle, it sort of hid and sort of muted a lot of its flavours. Because this has got the scallop, which is a little bit more neutral, it actually carries the red fruit beautifully. So far, the 100% Pinot Noir, the Blanc de Noir by Jean Vesselle, is taking the cake. Nice big bit. That was a big bite. It was lovely. I mean, it complements it beautifully. But so far, both of these two wines complement food a little bit better. This is such a complex and layered wine itself that it doesn't necessarily benefit from food. Beautiful nonetheless. So, for this round, Champagne Jean Vesselle, Oeil de Perdrix, Blanc de Noir, won. It took the cake. All right, on to the next. All right, time for the final dish. Now, a dish that I can truly say I've never ever cooked before, let alone had with any wine. The chef from the Crayford Hotel, Stéphane, a French national, told me about this dish today when I said, just sort of, picking his brain. I said, well, what's sort of a unique sort of food I can pair with a champagne? He said, chicken hearts, shallots, butter, cooked in either brandy or champagne. So, here goes. The butter's already in there, smelling beautiful. So we'll do 3. And we'll put a little bit more butter in there as well. And then we'll put some shallots in. And I do have to say that actually probably smells the best yet. So we'll cook the chicken hearts through. Then we'll pour some champagne in. Judging by the smell of this, we just need a little bit more sort of freshness and acidity. So I'm going to go the Champagne Guibra, the shallots. Still cook the chicken hearts with the shallots, but just don't eat the shallots. That's cooked. They take an incredibly short amount of time to cook through. Actually very nice. So with the Champagne Guibra, they're surprisingly very fresh. There's no heaviness. They're not overtly salty. They do pick up the flavours from the shallots really quite nicely. Oh, that's lovely. I recommend this to everyone. It really makes the red fruits, oh, wow. So that really, really does make the red fruits and the Jean Vesselle sort of jump out. But it also makes the acidity sort of really quite alive and whiz-fizz and sort of spritzy. That's good. I promise that I did not plan the succession in which these would match with the foods that we cook tonight. However, that goes so bloody good with chicken hearts. The champagne Caze Thibaut, it tames the vinous nature. Instead of making it more flavoursome, it keeps it in check. And what it does have, it actually intensifies and drives and creates this beautiful line of acidity and structure. Tastes like chicken bacon in a really nice way. It's got a little bit of sort of burnt flavour, especially from the shallots. Well, there we go. So, what we've learnt tonight, Champagne Guibert goes perfectly with bone marrow. Champagne Jaune Vesselle, 100% Pinot Noir, goes beautifully with blood pudding. And Scallops, Champagne Caze Thibaut, 100% Pinot Meunier made in a very, very vinous and wild and natural style, goes beautifully with chicken hearts. So, when you're drinking champagne this winter, try something different, because that was truly enjoyable. That was truly enjoyable, and it was more fun than just having oysters. I love oysters more than anyone, but that was fun. That was fun and delicious, and I couldn't be more happy. So thank you very much for joining us on our first episode of Taste and Drink. If you want to join in next week, we are doing Domaine Agnes et Didier d'Auvassar from Chablis. So we're doing a Petit Chablis, a Chablis AC, and then a Chablis Premier Cru Bourgeois. And we're going to look at the different complexities in each wine and how they progress and how they build. We're going to match them with some food. I'm going to teach you about my specialty, which is Chablis chicken. And I'm sure we'll come up with a couple of other fun things. So, I'll see you next week.